New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we will be exploring spiritual mediumship and its investigation. With me is Dr. Julie Beischel, who is the co-founder and director of research at the Windbridge Institute for Applied Research in Human Potential, located in Tucson, Arizona. She is one of the premier investigators in the fields of survival of consciousness and mediumship research. She received her doctorate in Pharmacology and Toxicology with a minor in Microbiology and Immunology from the University of Arizona and has published in a number of peer-reviewed journals. Her books include Investigating Mediums, Meaningful Messages Making the Most of Your Mediumship Reading, and Among the Mediums, A Scientist's Quest for Answers. This is an interview conducted via the internet, so now I'll switch over to the Skype video. Welcome, Julie. It's a pleasure to be with you. I've, of course, been aware of your work for quite a while, and it's interesting to me. You seem to be...
Yeah, no, I definitely am. And I've been doing that for, I think, 15 years now, working full-time researching mediums. When we started, my research partner, Mark Bacuzzi, and I, when we started the Windbridge Institute in 2008, we were interested in all the parapsychology topics. We wanted to study everything. And in 2017, we decided we're serving no one by trying to serve everyone. So we created the Windbridge Research Center, which is a nonprofit, and we moved all the afterlife research and mediumship to the new Windbridge Research Center, so that now we know. So the Institute still exists, but it is doing normalizing, optimizing, and utilizing psi functioning. And then the Windbridge Research Center focuses on alleviating suffering around dying, death, and what comes next.
Because I suppose, bottom line, one of the things that you have found is that mediums can be helpful for people who are grieving the loss of a loved one.
That's what the anecdotal data show, and we did a little bit of survey data, retrospective survey. We asked people to remember how you felt before and after the reading, and people did report that it made them feel better. But we still need to collect that clinical trial data, basically, like where people are fill out the questionnaire before the reading and 30 days later, and I've designed that study. Now we just have to collect all that data. And I'm also interested in other kinds of after-death communication. We refer to mediumship as assisted after-death communication. So the medium is the one actually experiencing the communication, and then she shares the messages she receives with you. So we call that assisted. But then there's what's called requested, so that you can engage in certain practices or using certain technologies or products where you're asking your deceased one. So we just released, this is a plug, a shameless plug. Here it comes. I created these meaningful messages. It's a deck of cards, and in there are 11 of it's 48 cards. 11 of the cards are signs, so that you shuffle them and you randomly choose one. And then if you get a signs card, like it might say, today I'm going to pay attention and look for a feather. And then it gives your deceased loved one an opportunity to try and show you a feather today. And then so that you both can be working on that today. So there's things like that where you can request an ADC.
I see. I presume that most individuals in the population who report some form of communication with a deceased relative or friend or loved one, that it happens in dreams primarily.
That's a big one. There's a lot of research actually with what are called spontaneous after-death communication experiences. I think the most prevalent one is the sense of presence. So just sort of feeling that the person is around. But dreams are a big one too. I mean, there's all kinds of spontaneous after-death communication, flickering lights and electronic things, and when you can smell an odor, a scent that reminds you of the person. Oh, like, why would I be smelling cigar smoke? There's no cigar around here. Oh, it's to remind me of my grandfather. Things like that. So there's lots of different kinds of ways that people can have these spontaneous after-death communication experiences.
Well, from the point of view of a grief counselor, these experiences are undoubtedly very useful, but a grief counselor would not be necessarily interested in what I call the ontological reality of an afterlife. That's more of a research question. And as a researcher, I presume you're really interested in that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up. I'm not a counselor. My degree is in the hard sciences, pharmacology and toxicology. But we have a paper under peer review right now, with a co-author. I co-authored a paper. She's the first author of a grief counselor, an LCSW, and the paper is about a tool that she developed that clinicians can use to assess clients' afterlife beliefs and experiences, because nobody's asking their clients about it, and that's a big thing to a lot of people, and it has an effect on your grief as well as your continuing relationships with the people in your life living. So we're hoping that this paper, when it comes out, gives grief counselors and other clinicians the tools to be able to bring that into the client clinician relationship, and people can start talking about it, because it's really important. And it does, it can affect, like you said, all kinds of things ontologically. What's going to happen to me when I die? And that has so many repercussions of like our decisions that we make about end of life care. And, there's terror management theory that people who are scared of their own death will try and push their belief systems on other people so that, well, at least my belief system won't die when I die. Well, if you aren't scared of your own death, if you know that you will continue to live, your consciousness will continue to survive after your death, then maybe you don't feel the need to do that anymore. And so socially, that's really important. So yeah, there's a lot of, this has far-reaching implications, this line of research.
Well, I know you've done a number of studies where you're simply looking at the question of whether a medium can come up with accurate information about a deceased person. And you've shown that they do. They come up with accurate information they couldn't have otherwise known. That's
true. Yeah. A few years ago, we published a replication study where it was readings with 20 different mediums. I think it was 58 readings under various levels of blinding, but at the maximum 5 levels of blinding. We used to call it quintuple-blind protocol. So 5 levels of blinding. And that eliminated all the normal explanations for where a medium could be getting her information. So in the protocol, it's just me and a medium on the phone. All we have is the first name of a deceased person. We don't know anything else. I serve as the proxy sitter for the absent sitter. And then I ask the medium specific questions about that deceased person. What do they look like? What's their personality? What were their hobbies or activities? What was their cause of death? Did they have any specific messages for the sitter? And is there anything else you can tell me about that person? So very specific things that you couldn't just know from the name. And so the first question people ask is, well, how does the medium find the right Bob? Well, the way that they experience it is that Bob finds them. Mm-hmm. And so it's an issue we talk about. It's receive versus retrieve. It's like picking up a ringing telephone. Like they're receiving the communication. They're not out there searching for the answers. And that's really important because people, I think, because of the misrepresentation often in the media, people think that the medium can give them whatever they want to hear. Well, they can't. It's like you can't make a person tell you what you want to hear from them. All she can do is listen and experience the communication, which is usually all five senses. Mm-hmm. They smell things and hear things and feel things in their body and see things. And then they just sort of translate that to the sitter, the living person wanting to hear from the dead person. And so that's all they can do. And so what we showed in the replication study was, when a person scores for accuracy, the reading that the medium did, we do target versus decoy. Mm-hmm. So when the sitter scores a target reading where the medium was given the name of their deceased person, and then they score a decoy reading where the medium did a reading for someone else, and they can't tell which reading is which. And then statistically what we do is compare the scoring of those two. And we did find people scored target readings statistically significantly higher than they scored control readings. Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting is that it's not like 100% versus 0%. There's some, right? People are only so different. There's going to be some things, even in a control reading, in a decoy reading, that are going to fit your person, just because people are only so different. So, but the difference between the scores was statistically significant. So we did demonstrate that mediums can report accurate and specific information about the deceased with no prior knowledge, without any feedback during or even after the reading. We don't even tell them how they did afterwards. And without using fraud or deception. There's no way they can look somebody up or anything like that. So that we call that phenomenon anomalous information reception. So we've demonstrated anomalous information reception. That they're talking to dead people, we cannot say that. We can just say they've provided this accurate information. That's as far as we can go with that data.
Now, I believe I read one of your studies in which, by chance alone, you would expect the sitter to identify the correct reading as opposed to the decoy 50% of the time. And I think you reported that they were actually correct about 76% of the time.
I think I wanted to say 74 when you were saying it. I'd have to look. Again, it was a few years ago that we published that study. Yeah, we do 3 types of scoring. So the sitters score each item in the decoy and the target. They give the whole reading a numerical score, and then we say, pick which one is yours. So just a binary forced choice. Mm-hmm. And that's the data that you're talking about. Yeah, and all 3 types of those data were statistically significant.
Well, a 74% hit rate or anything, in fact, above 60% would be, from a statistical point of view, remarkably significant. And it does strike me that, let's take other forms of psi, like remote viewing. I know my friend Marty Rosenblatt has been trying to use remote viewing to predict the stock market and also athletic events. He's been doing that for 10 years. With hundreds and hundreds of trials, and he reports a hit rate of about 60% when you might expect a 50% hit rate. So if you're getting 74%, it suggests that something is going on, that there's a stronger connection, a psi connection than in the mediumistic context than you have in a normal remote viewing context.
Yeah, and we've written about that and of why that mediumship really serves as a really good example of to do psi experiments, because whatever they're doing, it's psi. If they're using psi with the living to get the information from the living sitter, that's psi. If they're talking to the dead, that's psi, because they're not using the senses, so it has to be psi. So whatever they're doing is psi. You have this population of people who can do it on demand, right? We have a team of 20 mediums that we work with. I guess it's 18 now. 2 have retired since we started this work. And the effect sizes are really strong for this. And yeah, it's a really good way to look at psi and just the nature of consciousness.
Now, I know there are people who have argued, and I think it's a very interesting argument, that the fact that the mediums seem to score so much higher than, let's say, typical remote viewers, suggests that this could be evidential of an afterlife, a different, let's call it a different mechanism involved than with remote viewing.
The piece that we, like the path that we chased was the medium's experiences, the phenomenology. So, like, there's these, for eons, there's been this survival versus psi debate. Is it psi with the living, or is it survival of consciousness? And, but we wrote papers, define, like, we made a new term, because whatever they're doing is psi. So you can't say psi survival. So we made survival psi and somatic psi. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's this, but if you ask a flippin' medium, they know what somatic psi feels like, and they know what survival psi feels like, and they're not the same. Mm-hmm. And it's much different in modern times than it was when people studied mediums in the 1880s, when the mediums went into a full trance and they didn't have any conscious experience of the reading. These mediums are fully awake and aware. And so after the reading, you can ask them things about their experiences. And so we published a paper at the end of last year where we did quantitative and qualitative analyses of their descriptions. I think it was over 100 mediums. I think 130 around there mediums. Describe your experiences when communicating with the deceased. Describe your experiences when retrieving information about like a living sitter, a living person during like a psychic reading. And there were quantitative and qualitative differences in the way that they described those things. So they're very different. And we need to, if we take people's word for it when we study pain, we need to take people's word for it when we study their experiences of psi.
Well, you mentioned your background in pharmacology and toxicology, and it would seem to me that a lot of the research protocols might be similar, because when you administer a new drug to somebody, you really want to know their subjective experience.
Right. There are a number of things physiologically that the only way that you can study it is to ask the person, how do you feel? Like depression, there's no like meter for depression. You have to question that person. And yeah, so it fits in with that way of, that scientific way of looking at things. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Now, I know when you look at the various possibilities, you also bring up, I think you call it a reservoir of psychic information, that it might not be communication with the deceased. It might not be living agent psi. It might be like tuning into what some people call the Akashic record.
The term that we use, somatic psi, it does include that. So somatic in biology, that means, soma means body. Mm-hmm. So we use the term because it includes like the body of the living sitter, like if they're just reading it from the living person, and the body of information that exists somewhere in the universe. So yeah, the Akashic record or the psychic reservoir, it's been called previously. Yeah, so that the somatic psi theory, it involves all of those things. Yeah, but again, the phenomenological research shows that the mediums know what that feels like, and they're saying, no, this talking to the deceased is different than that.
Mm-hmm. And at one time, you had a program where you were actually certifying mediums. I believe I read recently that you've discontinued that.
Yeah, it's been discontinued for years. We had received a research grant really early on to create a team that we could then use in research going forward. And so we certified a team, and then the grant ended, and it's a really time consuming and resource intensive protocol. It's 8 steps. It takes months and months of the medium's time, the researcher's time. So we don't do it. We built a team. We've been working with that team. But what we do want to do, and so we offer that list of mediums who've been certified. You can go to windbridge.org, and that list of mediums is on the site there. And people say, well, that's sitters need it to know if a medium's good. Then your certified mediums, that they know that's something that they can sort of depend on. Like, you should be testing mediums all the time. Like, there's no way we could ever test all the mediums that are out there. Mm-hmm. And so what we're working on at the Windbridge Research Center is like a Bill of Rights, sort of, where we're training sitters. Like, we can't test all the mediums, but here's what you can do to know that your medium, that you're, it's a contract. It's a professional. You're paying, like, it's a contracted position. Yeah. Here's things that you can do to make sure that you're getting the best medium. We can't make sure everybody's getting the best medium, but and we have so at the center that we do rigorous research, and then we try and create free educational materials. Mm-hmm. So we do have some fact sheets on the website where it's like tips for sitters, because what we were hearing from our team of mediums was that because of the way mediums are portrayed on TV, sitters were coming to them and getting disappointed because they were thinking that's how it was going to go, and that's not how it works in real life. And they're not 100% accurate, and and they can't get you what you want. That you have to let it, and every medium is different, and you have to let her process. You have to, and it's a 3-person team, right? The medium is only 1 person. You're involved as a sitter. Your deceased person is involved, and it's human communication. So that always gets messy. So we created this fact sheet with some tips, some do's and don'ts for sitters when they're interested in getting a mediumship reading. So at least whoever you go to, whatever medium you go to, here you can make sure you've optimized your role in the 3-person process.
Well, in the 19th century, of course, spiritualism was a huge fad. It swept through America, through Europe, through South America, and at the same time, there were many, many instances of fraud that were uncovered, and there was sort of a ritual that went with it, a seance. I haven't heard you use the word seance once yet, so I'm assuming your mediums don't require seances.
No, I've never been to a seance with, I don't, they may do that in their free time. Right. The only interaction I have with our mediums is during research studies, usually. I've gotten to know them at conferences and that sort of thing, but there are several on our team. I've never even been in the same room with them. All of our research readings take place over the phone. So we don't need to be in the same place. It's better if we're not in the same place. And so, no, we don't, like that word, like when you said it, I was like, oh, methodologically, that's so messy, a seance. There's so many people, and the environment is so hard to control. Yeah, that's not, we're empiricists. So that's a research method that we are not working on right now.
Of course, there have been researchers who have endeavored to simulate seances, Beischel in England, and of course the Philip Group in Toronto. So it's been done, but I'm under the impression you're not really looking for table levitations or physical phenomena the way they were.
That's correct. Yeah, we don't really study physical mediumship. And I'm big on, you have to, if you're studying a natural phenomenon, you have to study it as close to the way it exists in nature as, that you can. And the mediums that we work with don't do seances. They do some in-person readings. They do on the phone readings. They do Skype readings. So we're trying to study what they do the way that they do it. So they do phone readings, and that's it's the most easiest to blind and to control. So that's the method that we've chosen to do when we do the accuracy testing.
So I guess it's fair to say that the whole movement known as spiritualism, and I presume the mediums you work with today would think of themselves as spiritualists.
No.
They don't?
No, we use the term secular, where they're secular. Most of them are. I think there's one on our team that I think might consider herself a spiritualist. But for the rest of them, we call them secular American mediums. They don't subscribe to any organized religion or organized belief system. So it's a talent, it's an ability that they have, and they do the readings. There may be there's a sort of overview spiritual. They may have some spiritual beliefs in common, but not any organized religion. No, I'm glad you asked me that. I'm glad we cleared that up.
Well, I guess it's fair to say that the idea of secular spirituality is relatively recent. It's been a big movement, I think, over the last 30 years, maybe 40 years. But back in the 19th century, when spiritualism was a huge movement, secular spirituality was probably rarely, if ever, discussed.
That's true. That's really true. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of, so again, you have to study the phenomena as it exists in nature and as it exists in time, right? As it's existing now. Like even 50 years ago, it was different. And so we have to follow the way that the trends are going, even in research. Yeah.
Well, when you are selecting mediums to work with in your research studies, do you have particular criteria other than somebody's self-identification as a medium?
Well, we have this, all the mediums on our team are certified. It was this 8-step certification procedure. And so they were interviewed. They did test readings under blinded conditions. So we did test their abilities. But they did interviews and tests and training, like so that they understood. We actually made them learn about the human research subjects ethics, because they themselves are human research subjects, and the sitters that they are providing the readings for are as well. So they're certified research mediums. We're clear about that. We're not certifying mediums just like, yep, that's a good medium. No, that's a good research medium. So they understand, they ring in on protocol design. Like if I have an idea, then can go to them and say, I'm thinking about doing this. Could you do that? And they go, I couldn't really do that, but maybe if it was like this. So they're ringing in on protocol design. They understand the need for blinding. They understand the need that we're not going to give them feedback about how they did. They're just as interested. They're scientifically minded, and they're just as interested in the results as we are.
I'm under the impression you treat them as partners in your research rather than as subjects.
That's true. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Co-researchers, I think in some areas they call it that. Yeah.
So you're getting away from sort of this colonial model of the...
Do you mean patriarchal? Yes. Yes, we are.
The lofty researcher and the lowly research subjects who are prone to all sorts of delusions.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, how can I think that I know more about mediumship than they do? Yeah, I have to, they have to be involved in the designing of this. Again, because they're aware versus historically when the mediums were in trance. And they didn't really know what was going on during a reading. These mediums do know. So yeah, we have to get their impression. Definitely.
Well, some of the most interesting studies that you've done and other researchers have done as well has to do with the physiology of the medium. And actually, I think read one of your studies that dealt with physiology, but I think it's quite unusual that there may well be physiological components that distinguish when a medium is actually in contact with a deceased individual. We have a paper that's just about to come out. We only did
I think this is a first real physiology study. So what we did was we had 5 mediums come to a doctor's office and do a phone reading, and we took their blood before and after the reading, and we took their blood before and after a control situation where no dead people were contacted. And we took so much blood, and we paid for so many blood tests, and we took just basic physiology measures too, heart rate, blood pressure, those kind of things, and we found no difference. So there's no immediate stressor on the body to these veteran mediums, right? They've been doing this forever. And so then my conclusion was, why I wanted to look at that was, the mediums on our team, they have a high rate of autoimmune diseases. And so we did a separate study, a survey study, where we asked mediums and non-mediums, that was just self-reported, mediums and non-mediums, of their health issues and history and that sort of thing. And we did find a statistically significantly higher disease burden of the mediums, people who self-identify as mediums. So then that was a little incongruous, because if they're having more disease and they're mediums, then it should be the mediumship that caused the disease, but it isn't. But they also score really high, statistically higher on measures of childhood trauma and abuse, which has been very well in just the mainstream, not medium, just in people in general. That's been very well correlated to disease in adulthood, is childhood trauma. So where I have landed, my conclusion is that it's not mediumship that causes disease, it's trauma, childhood experiences that cause disease in mediums. And perhaps that same thing, those same experiences in childhood, cause mediumship too.
Well, I know there are studies pointing out that people who report above average amounts of spontaneous psychic experiences also report a higher degree of childhood trauma.
Yeah, that's been various researchers' conclusions as well. So yeah, I think that's my in my PowerPoint slide. That's my trauma causes mediumship and disease. Yeah.
And spontaneous psychic functioning.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
which is a lot of how the mediums first, when they had a first experience, and that we had at the center we publish a open access peer reviewed journal called Threshold, and we had a paper come out earlier this year in Threshold by an author who looked at mediums' reports of their very first experiences. And so, that those are spontaneous experiences when you saw your deceased grandmother at the foot of your bed, right? So that tracks as well. If you consider mediumship, it also started as a spontaneous psychic experience at some point.
Well, I do recall reading a study. You were not the first author, but you were one of the authors of this study. I'm pretty sure it was on your website, about electrocortical activity in mediums associated with particular items they came up with, if I remember correctly, that were identified by the sitter as being accurate.
It's really, yes, that we did do that study with Windbridge mediums. And it was EEG study, and EEG is really difficult with mediumship because mediumship is talking, right? And you can't collect EEG data while the subject is talking because of jaw muscle artifacts. Yeah. So in that study, I had to ask the question, and then I had to say 20 seconds, and the medium had to be quiet while she received it. It was very, very disruptive to the medium. So we did see significant results, and there were correlations, but I don't think that was looking at mediumship really, because it was this very, very disruptive process. So we're moving forward in the direction of functional MRI, where you can talk. And because the mediums stay awake, we can put them in the MRI tube and collect functional magnetic resonance imaging data from them while they do a reading and while they do a psychic reading for the living. And so we're we're headed in that direction. That's all I can say right now.
Oh, okay. Well,
Stay tuned.
The possibilities are interesting, shall we say. I know that there have been studies of people who have dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder, where their physiology will change as their personality changes. Sometimes even the color of the eyes change. Have you noticed anything like that in your work with the mediums? Does it resemble at all a dissociative identity disorder?
I think those studies are fascinating. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like one personality can be diabetic and one isn't. Oh, that's just so fascinating. Of the mind's control over the body. I'm just so fascinated by that. Yeah. The research that we do with our mediums is very controlled and in very specific situations. Like I'm not, I don't live with them. I don't know what their life is like. So they do the readings and the the quintuple-blind protocol, and we ask them the phenomenology questions, and they fill out the questionnaires. So it doesn't. I don't think so. I don't like. Mm-hmm. They're not experiencing those dead people as themselves. Yeah. It's a separate volitional consciousness is the way that they experience it and the way that they describe it. So they're not identifying. That was my first, in talking to them, I realized a lot of them had autoimmune diseases, and that's what got that direction of research going. But that was my first thought was, experiencing the cause of death of all these people regularly, does your body get confused of what's you and what's not you? Mm-hmm. And is that why there are autoimmune diseases? But it doesn't look like that's what it is. It looks like it's the trauma piece, but that is the direction that I started down. But they don't, they always know that the thing is different, like that the experience is about a different person. I think they identify. I think maybe where it gets muddy is like when your brain is trying to interrupt and be like, maybe it's this. Like, no, just shush, brain, and let the dead person talk. But other than that, I don't think there's any confusion between what's the dead person and what's the medium.
And I know I've talked to researchers who study dissociative identity disorder, and I've asked them the same question. Could this be related to mediumship? And they all say no.
Okay. Good. So we're on the same page.
Yeah. Okay. You're on the same page with them, but I'm still curious about it. Here's another question for you. These days, a very popular term I hear a lot is channeling, which is akin to mediumship, but it doesn't necessarily involve deceased individuals, although it could. People often channel, spirit guides, and entities from ancient times and the like. Is that at all related to the mediums that you work with?
Yeah. The way that I learned it was, channeling isn't necessarily dead people. It can be, like you said, these other entities, but mediumship is dead humans or animals. Mm-hmm. Like that's a direction of our research too. And, with a lot of this stuff, the language can be problematic. Mm-hmm. And so we specifically study mediumship with deceased people because the information is verifiable. Yeah. And I don't know, what aliens or angels, I can't verify that stuff. So that as empiricists, that's not a direction that we've gone down. So I don't live with the mediums, so I don't know if they do channeling, in their individual practices. It's not something that we've looked at in our research. Okay. I can see that.
Well, I know in the 19th century, when you say you don't live with the medium, some of the researchers back then, such as William James, spent a lot of time with just one medium. William James studied Mrs. Piper for years, maybe for decades, as far as I know. And he did, I presume, get to know her extremely well as a person, and was able to make all sorts of subjective judgments about her her mediumship, I guess that's not the approach. You're much more of an experimentalist.
That is my strength. That is my training. But I am a person, and so I do spend some time on the phone with them. I have attended conferences. I know of one. I attended a conference with a medium was there too. She did a talk and I did a talk, and I did spend the night in her home while we went to that conference. So I don't try and Charlie Tart talks about state-specific sciences.
Yes.
And so I do, and people would ask me that, oh, are you a medium? And I used to say, I'm not, and I don't want to be, because that would prevent me from being objective about, like if they told me about their phenomenological experiences and I was like, oh, that's not the way I experience it. I didn't want to be, I didn't want to bias myself in hearing what they had to say. But I do think that not trying to hold them at arm's length is also useful, because there are a lot of things. Like I said, how would I know about the autoimmune diseases if I wasn't like talking with them? And I, that where would that have come up with during a quintuple-blind reading? It wouldn't have. So I do need to treat them like people and get to know them. And so I do. It's a. I don't want to become a medium, because I feel like that would bias me, but I do want to treat them as people and, again, co-researchers, part of the team, and to get to know these. I have great aspirations that I want to block out time in my month that, like, get one of them on the phone once a week and let's just talk for a half hour, an hour, and just see where it goes and see what where that goes, if that comes up with new research ideas. That's but I have yet to figure out how to schedule that into my life. So I haven't done that yet, but it's my plan at some point.
Well, I think one of the most interesting studies I'd ever heard of involving a medium was the famous case of the chess game from the dead, where the goal was to see not only could the medium provide information about a deceased person, but could the medium actually exhibit some sort of skill, in this case, chess mastery, that a deceased person would have had. Have you explored anything along those lines?
No, we haven't. I've written about that. There have historically, a lot of people have been like, well, what would really prove mediumship? And then they have some idea. Yeah. And it usually is based on a lot of assumptions that are not true. And a lot of it is, you don't know what it's like to be dead. And so that person, that chess master, he was able to convey that to that medium. Yeah. We don't know about other skill sets. There's this really great book called Stroke of Insight, and a physician wrote it. And she had a stroke, and she knew what that was doing. She knew what was happening. And she talks about trying to dial 911, and she knew what the phone was, and she knew she needed to use it to get help, but she didn't know what the numbers were. And my husband, Mark, he's like, I bet that's what it's like to be dead. I bet that can give us some insight in when your consciousness is kind of, not really tied to your body too well anymore. And so I think there's a lot of other ways that we can demonstrate survival or see, what can the deceased tell us and that sort of thing. But I don't think these, here's a code, or, here's a riddle. Like, you don't know, can you tell me your combination to your high school locker right now? No. So, like, these assumptions of what you can convey to a medium and what a medium can understand in the process. So we don't try and do those kind of things. Again, we study it like it happens. Yeah. So if we were observing that this dead person wants to play chess, then we would study that. I haven't. That's not what the dead want to do. The dead want to tell you that they're okay, that they're still with you, that they still love you, and that they like the color you painted the kitchen, and that they have the dog with them, and that that's what dead people want to do. They don't want to play your games or answer your riddles. So we don't really follow
Well, as I recall in that case, the medium, and as many mediums have been reported, had like a guide or one guide. And in this instance with the somebody came up with the idea, wouldn't it be great, yes, if we could contact a chess master? And so the question was posed to the guide of the medium. And, basically, could you find us a chess master who would be willing to come through? And the guide said, sure, I'll see what's possible. And sure enough, there was a deceased chess master who was willing to play along.
Okay. Yeah.
So my next question is, do you find that the mediums you work with have guides?
Yeah, that's, and in that study that I told you about that was just published about the medium's initial experiences. Yeah. Some of them and their initial experiences was with spirit guides. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not something that we've looked at. But again, in just talking to them, I've heard that yeah, they do. I think of them and refer to them as bouncers. That's sort of one of their functions. That's the way the mediums have described it, is that they keep out the riffraff, mm-hmm. and especially in our research, they make sure the right person who we want to hear from during this reading today, that's the person that gets through, and that there aren't. Yeah, we I know it's historically evidential, but we try not to have drop-ins. Mm-hmm. We do not want drop-ins, so we specifically request that the sitter, we ask that when we're recruiting sitters, do you think that anyone else would want to come and barge into this? No, I think my mom is going to be quiet while my dad talks. And mm-hmm. So we're really trying to optimize the process to get the one deceased person.
Well, it does sound like what you mentioned to me earlier, that you consider a 3-person team, the deceased person, the medium, and the sitter. But mm-hmm. it's possible that the guide is also a 4th entity.
Oh, definitely. And maybe the sitter has spirit guides too, and they're helping. Yeah. Yeah. We don't know how any of this works, to be mm-hmm. honest.
Well, you're certainly paving a lot of new ground, because very few people, if any, today are doing the kind of intensive work you're doing with mediums. I'm just not aware of it, although I guess it's fair to say that there's an explosion of people who call themselves paranormal researchers and go out to visit haunted houses. And I'm under the impression many of them try to recruit mediums to come along with them to visit haunted houses. So there's a huge, I guess you'd have to call it an army of amateur researchers looking into this sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's my husband, that's his forte. He did field investigations of allegedly haunted locations, and he had really strict protocols where there's sound recordings that they often collect, where his protocol was they would turn the recorder on and ask for communication, and then everybody in the room would have a clock and a timer and be writing down, a truck drove by right then, and this, so that it was when you went back to the tape and there's an anomalous sound, that was when the truck drove by. Hmm. And so he had this very, very carefully organized investigation protocol. And I don't think he used a medium specifically, but it's very difficult. Like I saw on TV, they brought a medium to an Italian restaurant in New York City. And they're like, maybe something happened here. Really? Even I know that's going to be a mafia hit you're asking about. So it's really hard to control for, it's people, and people have been in the world, and it's really hard to control for what you already know or what you could just sort of glean. So I'm much more comfortable in my lab with my protocol, where they can't know anything about George, who's somewhere and is somebody's husband, and there's no information that they could get. And let's talk to George and see what he has to say to his wife, and see, how that makes her feel. Mm-hmm. That's really my interest.
Well, Julie, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I have to commend you on the work that you're doing, and also your entrepreneurial spirit to really set up your own institute and arrange for your own funding and to keep it going as you have for over a decade now.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here. I really enjoyed it.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and hopefully we'll have opportunities to do more interviews in the future. I'd enjoy that.
Sounds good.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
You can now download a free PDF copy of issue number 8 of the new Thinking Aloud magazine, or order a beautiful printed copy. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.